right, Winkler. So we're going to compare and contrast everything that I see now to your assessment, which I have brought up, and it's right in the middle of the screen here. All right, so we didn't go over the shoulder assessments because that's going to be pretty much indicative of everything else. Like, I could tell you what your shoulders are going to do based off of what your spine does. We're going to go over the overhead squat. We're going to go over the reverse toe touch. We're going to go over the toe touch. We're going to go over the standing rotation. And we're going to go over your shoulder assessment. We're going to be able to tell you basically, like, there's a set of predictable norms that like, you're going to say, hey, like, if you have this, it's probably going to lead to this. If you have this, it's probably going to lead to this. And then, like, all together, you had this, this, and this, which establishes that this is where you're at right now. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about, which I think I told you before, like, there's two different types of people. You have hypermobile and you have stiff. So I'm hypermobile, which means that any type of stiffness or lack of range of motion that I have comes from poor alignment rather than stiff muscles or stiff joints, right? So we're going to establish that you are pretty much hypermobile too. We have the Baton score, which is right here, which is establishing hypermobility. The breathing stuff loosens you up tremendously, which is not good or not bad. It also teaches you how to move the right way. So again, doing the breathing stuff in tandem with good lifting is going to teach you how to do everything you need to. The problem is if you only do the breathing and you don't do the lifting, you're going to get as loose as you can be. You're not going to have any stability anywhere. All right. So you're a 6 out of 9, which means that you're closer to, like, as hypermobile as it gets. When I was playing baseball, I was a 9 out of 9. You want to be hypermobile because that allows you to have it can put you in the positions that other athletes can't. So if somebody's stiff, they're not going to be able to put themselves in the mechanical position that you can. So, for example, right, watch how Clayton Kershaw throws, right? You could tell he's kind of loose jointed, he's hypermobile because of the way he throws. But the reason that Kershaw is as good as he can is because of the way he throws. So you don't want to take that away from him. You want to just make sure that he doesn't get hurt. And when he does throw like that. So the first thing we're going to look at is T-spine extension. Basically, to get overhead, you need to have your T-spine, which is up your back, extend 15 degrees. If you can get overhead all the way, your T-spine is going to extend unless you're going to get it from somewhere else, which is probably going to be your lower back. So when I first assessed you didn't get it from your lower back. You got it from more of your T-spine. You had a big rib flare, right? That's where the breathing stuff comes in. The breathing stuff will keep your ribs down as you go overhead. It'll also loosen up your lats. Overhead squat. Ideally, you want your hips to sit straight down and nothing to move. Your hips shouldn't curl underneath you. Your upper back should not cave forward. Like, you should be able to keep an upright spine, right? So we'll see that your arms are bent here. You did get below parallel, but you did have a hip hinge. So if you have a hip hinge, that means that your T-spine is going to flex forward as if you're touching your toes, right? Push up, whatever, we'll go over that. Lunge, we'll go over that. Toe touch, so spinal flexion. Basically what that means is if you ever watch Scherzer throw, the way he finishes, right? So that's flexion. If you don't have flexion, you're never going to be able to release the ball out front of yourself. So this is one of the things that I want to talk to you about that was different in your assessment, right? So this is kind of where the breathing stuff is good, but again, if you do it too much, you don't teach yourself how to move, you kind of get too loose. So whenever I touch my toes, ideally I want my hips to go straight back. That means that anytime I go to flex forward, my hips load, right? So just remember that. Posterior shift, that means your weight shifted backwards, all right? We're going to remember that. Standing rotation, down here, you were a little bit more stiff on your right than left. Again, when you're stuck in that right hip, it's very, very hard to get out of it and to rotate into it. So we can tend to load our knee a little bit better. Or a little bit more, not a little bit better. All right, now we're going to go over all this stuff. I'm going to keep this right here so we can go back to it. All right, so let's take a look at your just static posture.
After 2 calls they didn't like. Giancarlo Stanton, though, trying to change things around, keeping the Yankees alive. Knocks that ball to center field. Bradley has a little bit of a problem with it, but it's a double.
Right.
At least there's still life.
So we're gonna go back from the beginning. Just wanted to take a look at that first. All right, so the first thing that I see here when you're facing me, is that right side just a tad bit lower. Again, you know, that's kind of just you being stuck into that right hip, that right shoulder. Let's watch you stand to the side.
Out after 2.
All right, so from the side, you can see how, again, this is night and day better than what it used to be, but we still have to progress you more. So ideally, you want your ear, your shoulder, your hip, and your heel to be in a straight line. We're going to go over all this. But you can kind of see how your arms are kind of behind you, right? Can't really see. So right there's a good view, right? So you can't even see your back here, which means that even though you can't see it, that means your T-spine is overextended. So your rib cage right here is all moving forward, all right? You can't even see your back here. So again, just the first view of, okay, he's probably extended, not in the right areas.
Carlos Stanton, though, tried to change.
So the second thing I see, again, is how far that right shoulder is lower. The back view is way better. You can see how the front of your right shoulder is kind of tilted forward, like moving more towards, like that shoulder is moving towards your pec a little bit more. You can also see how big the middle of your back is, right? So those mid-traps, those rhomboids, like they're protruding out. Again, if those shoulder blades are pinched together, that means I'm going to have to compensate through my thoracic spine, which is going to lead me to a rib flare. So having big shoulders and big rhomboids are good, but again, if your first move is to pinch those scapula together, you're going to overload that T-spine, and you're gonna have trouble reaching out front. So this is kind of just my first indication that you're still very extended. You just take a look at that view from behind. It's kind of, it's different. You can see how that right shoulder, like I said, is tilted forward. Because of that, your head compensates to the left. And then we'll go over the next video. So ankle mobility wasn't bad. I just wanted to go over how loose you are. So, I mean, you can get way past your toes here, right? Like, that's good. So that we know that any type of squat issue that you have is not going to come from ankle mobility, but rather hip positioning. So just remember that. Awesome. So we're going to I didn't even realize this when I first looked at it, but it's cool to kind of watch things over and over again. So the first thing I see again is when we're stiff, we're going to lack range of motion, but we're pretty much going to have stiffness in areas that we need it, right? So the first thing I see when you set up for your squat is how the middle of your ankle caves in, which means your feet are flat, which means gravity's taking over and it's pushing you more into internal rotation of those legs and pronation of those feet. So let's see what happens when you do a squat. Maybe your feet will turn out. Oh, they do, slightly, right? So you can kind of see that, right? So again, you don't know how to load your hips, so the compensation there is just letting your feet pronate. And then you can also see how your arms don't straighten out all the way. So gravity's taking you down because you're just simply not strong enough to keep your arms overhead. Not a range of motion issue, more of a stability issue. So back, the views from the side is going to be a little bit better, right? So you can see there, we'll go over that again, how on your way down, your upper body flexes forward, right? Again, to keep my arms overhead, I need extension here. Not here, though. Only in the middle of your back. So ideally, if I squat straight down, my shoulders should just drop straight down. Like I should never move forward. And then you could also see how much that weight is shifted forward, right? Again, ideally, nothing should move here, and your upper back should be straight up and down. So again, you could see how this comes from nothing with your ankles. It's actually all due to your hips. So poor positioning of your hips, or poor stability of your hips, rather. So you can see by elevating your heels, that's shifting your weight forward. You actually stay up a little bit more upright. Still not where it needs to get to, but better than that better than without the. So the back view is going to be good to see how your ankles cave in. Let's take a look at that, right? So look at that left ankle, right? You could see how the middle of your ankle is literally inside your entire foot. Like ideally that foot and that ankle should be in a straight line. And you have a butt wink, which again is just poor core control. So a lot of this has to do with the positioning of your spine, which is basically because of the positioning of your core. 1 second. We'll come back to that.
Monkey bench right there.
This is always a good one to say. All right, cool. So basically what this is called, it's called a reverse toe touch. So touching your toes is spinal flexion, which means can I flex forward and do what I need to do? Reverse toe touch is spinal extension, right? So ideally, the more extended I am, the harder time I'm going to have to flex forward. Now, what this one does is this pretty much tells me how extended you are, because if I live in as much extension as I live in, I'm not going to be able to extend more, if that makes sense. So somebody who lives in a crap ton of flexion ideally is going to be able to extend more, where somebody who lives in a crap ton of extension is probably not going to be able to extend as much as we want to, right? So ideally, when I touch my toes forward, my hips should go back. When I try to touch my toes backwards, my hips should go forward. I want you to take a look at where you learn to extend. So because you can't extend through your hips, you extend through your upper back, and then your knees shift forward, not your hips.
Monkey bench right there.
By the way, go Yankees. So you could see how those knees shift forward, those hips don't really move, and then your upper back rounds a little bit. Give me 1 second. All right. So this is a good one too. This is, again, kind of figuring out if my upper back and my lower back don't move right, then there's a good shot my neck won't move right as well. So you have a pretty much a big forward head posture. You kind of see that, right? So again, those ears should be in a straight line with those shoulders when you're just looking forward, right? So perfect example there, right? I think this side's not as bad as the other side when I was watching it, but ideally I want to be able to rotate solely through my neck. Again, if I can't rotate through my neck, it's because something up and down the chain is not working the right way. So the other side is a little bit worse, but you can see, so you can't rotate through your neck all the way, so instead you compensate and your head tilts. The other side's more drastic, so we'll go over that when we see it. All right, so you can see how that head tilts away, right? That ear looks like it's moving more towards the your ceiling. See what I'm saying there, right? I mean, again, it's not drastic, but it's enough for to understand that you're not moving through the middle of your back.
And Gardner got his point across.
Extension is good too. So we're looking for the whole chin facing the roof. So you can't even get there. So from the front it looked good, but you can see how ideally we want that angle to be straight. So chin all the way through. So you can't extend any more through your neck because you're already overextended there. So this is all just pretty much movement through the very, very, very top of your neck and the back of your skull. Let's look at shoulder range of motion. This is always a good one. This is one that, we're going to pretty much be able to dictate the answer. Oh, so look at your feet now. Again, all of your weight, gravity is just taking you down. That left one's a little bit worse than your right one, which is surprising. Majority of the time, the right one's going to be a little bit more pronated due to the patterns of the body. But, so, good external rotation, both sides. Very poor internal rotation on your right side. Again, when I lose internal rotation on my shoulders, it's because I'm extended through the wrong area. Right, so you can kind of see the difference between right and left. So again, when I'm stuck in that right hip, that left rib will flare up, and I'm going to lose internal rotation on my right arm. and then we'll look at this standing rotation. So one of the cool parts about being hypermobile, again, is it allows us to get into positions that ideally we shouldn't, but that's what's going to make us successful. Like I said, there's no way Clayton Kershaw should be able to throw the way he does, but that's why his curveball is as nasty as it gets, right? So you think you're rotating all the way, but we're going to go over this again. I want you to just watch this so you can see what I'm seeing. So in my assessment, when I first saw you, it said that you rotated more to the left than you did to the right. Right, again, look at those feet there. So gravity's taking you over, dude. We need to get you strong as crap. All right, so again, the main purpose of baseball, this is what sucks about baseball, it's a very outcome-oriented game. We're always looking to get to throw strikes, to throw 90, to do what we have to do. But to be honest with you, our body doesn't really give a shit how it gets there. That's just how it is, right? No matter what happens, if I can throw 90 and my body doesn't move right, but I could still throw 90, I'm going to throw 90, right? So again, this is standing rotation. I want to see if you can rotate through your hips and then through your shoulders. When you face the opposite way of me, I should be able to see both pockets. I want you to look at where you get most of your rotation from. A lot of it comes from your knees. So your compensation from your hips, because they don't work right, is loading your knees. Watch how they move. I'm the same way here. You can see how those knees kind of rotate, right? Ideally, they should stay forward, right? When I rotate in my hip, my knee should not move. And look at that one, right? This whole leg is in front of that one. Kind of funny how things work out, right? When we don't know how to move the right way, our body just says, screw it, I'm going to do what I want to do. Now, this one, again, is kind of, it is what it is. You know, when I first saw you, when you touched your toes, you had a posterior shift, which means that your hips went backwards and your knees bent. Knee hyperextension is a sign of hypermobility. If you take a look at Peyton's score, palms flat on the ground with knee hyperextension, that's just a sign of loose joints, right? Being able to do something I probably shouldn't be able to do. So from the front, you're like, oh, damn, this looks really good. Like, you know, he could touch his toes, you could touch the ground. Again, that's a sign of hypermobility. But then we look at it from the side, and we're like, oh, shit, his hips don't hinge. His knees stay flat, right? So this is all movement through your back. Ideally, when I touch my toes, my knee should unlock and my weight should shift backwards. That means that I know how to load my hips. Pretty cool to see kind of, you know, what happened to your body just by whatever you want to call it, whether you think that it's X is this reason and this and that. I think it's just understanding that, you know, PRI is good. It's an answer to a lot of questions, but it's not the ultimate answer. Ideally, it gives us the capacity to learn how to move, but then from there, we have to teach ourselves how to move. So we're not taking any steps backwards. You're starting from a better position than you were when I assessed you the first time. We just kind of have to reteach your brain how to do things the right way. So we got to teach you how to hinge through your hips. So RDLs, cable pull-throughs, unlock your knees when you do that, right? Holding the weight there. Probably no rowing for a long time because you're stuck in that extension posture. So we need to reach you more. So more push-ups, more cable presses, more landmine presses, more overhead carries. We need to get your arms over your head so they don't fall down and gravity takes them over. And we also need to just, you know, stabilize you more and more and more, right? A lot of your issues simply come from the fact right now that gravity is winning and it's taking you over. The only way to get rid of gravity taking you over is just by getting you as strong as we can. Let me know what you think, dude. I hope you liked it.